So most of us are familiar with the story of Hanukkah. We've talked about it already a little bit. Around 165 BCE, in the land of Judea, a great miracle happened, and that's what we celebrate. After being conquered by several different powerful rulers, including Alexander the Great, the land of Judea and all of its inhabitants was taken and controlled by a king called Antiochus IV, or also Antiochus Epiphanes. Unlike previous rulers who were known for supporting religious tolerance and cultural freedom, Antiochus and his supporters outlawed Judaism and repressed Jewish practice, often with violence. Unsurprisingly, this led to large-scale revolt by the Maccabees, led by a Jewish priest and his sons. And after many struggles and battles, this is the story we all know, the Jews won back their religious freedom and rededicated the temple. There was only enough oil to light the menorah for one day, but instead, miraculously, it lasted for 8. And this is what we celebrate when we light the Hanukkah. But there is another story that Jews tell on Hanukkah, some Jews. It's the story of a Jewish widow named Judith and how her courage helped to free the Jewish people from religious persecution and probably, quite possibly, death. In rabbinic times, her story was told on Hanukkah. This is a well-documented tradition, and somehow over the years that story has been lost. We can talk about that a little bit more. But in fact, the Judith story isn't included in the Tanakh, which is sort of the codified source of Jewish texts. So, well, many of the codified texts in the Christian tradition include her story in their copies of the Old Testament. Her Judith story is found in the Apocrypha. It's not in the codified text of our tradition. So her story goes like this. Most historians agree that the story of Judith actually took place a few hundred years before the story of the Maccabees, in a town called Bethulia, which was located in Judea, in the very south. Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of the Babylonian Empire, sent one of his generals to conquer, named Holofernes, to conquer Judea and all of the Jews who lived there. During this campaign, he camped outside of Bethulia with thousands of troops blocking off water, food, and other supplies from the city. And though the Jews fought back at first, they quickly became desperate. Their situation was very dire. And Judith, can you just go back? Yeah. So Judith, this widow, stepped in and said, you know what, I have a plan. So don't give in yet. Don't surrender. I have a plan, and just let me try this. Under the cover of night, Judith and her handmaid snuck out of Bethulia and into Holofernes' camp, pretending to surrender. The general was smitten by her beauty and her grace, and he took her to his tent, where she offered him some cheese and some wine, lots of wine. Holofernes fell into a deep sleep, can imagine why, and when he was finally out cold, Judith took his sword and chopped off his head. And this is a very popular scene. If you Google Judith, you'll just find hundreds of paintings and sculptures that depict this scene. Judith and her handmaid snuck out of the camp, taking Holofernes' head back with them to Bethulia. The Jews were emboldened by the women's bravery. Meanwhile, the enemy camp fell into complete chaos and panic, which created an opening for the Jews to launch a counterattack, which they won, and the Assyrian forces fell back. Though her story most likely took place at a different time in history than the Maccabean revolt, there are obvious parallels between the Judith story and the story of the Maccabees. So one is sort of this story of military victory, following a very familiar narrative of sort of the small conquering the mighty, right? This is one woman and her handmaiden conquering an entire army with the help of her people, who are this small community or village. And also there's the parallel between Judah Maccabee, the name Yehudah, and the name Yehudit, Judith. It's the male and female versions of that name. And there's also something to be said here about the strength of community, and particularly looking at the story of Judith, looking at her as someone who didn't actually act alone. She took her handmaid with her, somebody who could provide strength, helped her strategize, and helped her, commit the act and carry the head with her back to Bethulia. So it's interesting actually also that early rabbinic texts well document the recitation of the Judith story, and also a tradition of eating dairy on Hanukkah. In fact, it's probably true that the first latkes were actually made of fried cheese rather than fried potatoes, because potatoes are sort of a newer vegetable. And so there's this tradition, and some food historians say that the first latkes were probably made of cheese, remembering that Judith fed cheese to Holofernes, salty cheese, so that he would become thirsty. He would drink the wine so that she could kill him. Yeah, delicious. So that's for those of you out there who like to do cooking and connect food to holidays. This is sort of a new twist. So knowing this story, knowing about this tradition of eating dairy, and knowing that there are some communities that tell this story, but 3/4 of you don't, it really makes you wonder why. Why don't we tell this story? And also, what other stories don't we know and are we not sharing with our students? So I just want to take a few minutes to discuss whether or not you all think Judith is a hero. And actually, we're going to put all the questions up and let you guys sort of jump in and let us know, sort of, do you think she's a hero? And why do you think she's so often left out?